Welcome back to the Jazz Joe Hall Show. And as we heard in the 5 o'clock newscast, British Columbia is making it more expensive to pollute and is moving away from fossil fuels in an effort to meet 2030 emission targets. The Clean BC Roadmap to 2030 lays out a framework for individuals and a wide range of industrial sectors. The province plans to accelerate its commitment to increase the price on carbon pollution to meet or exceed the federal benchmark. The Clean BC Roadmap to 2030 also includes requirements for new industry projects to have enforceable plans to reach BC's legislated and sectoral targets and net zero by 2050. And BC hopes to reach 100% zero-emission vehicles by 2035. A very bold plan and lots to sort of go get into and look at the details here. We're joined now by George Heyman, BC's Environment Minister. George, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Good afternoon, Jazz.
So tell me, how confident are you that you can actually hit these targets?
Well, these targets were carefully worked on for a period of 3 years, and we have 8 different pathways and a series of measures to get us there. They've been independently modeled by Navius, which is a consulting company that specializes in modeling this, and they say we under this model we should hit or just slightly exceed the targets. But one of the things we built into the system last year, Jazz, was the Climate Change Accountability Act. It requires us to say what we're going to do every year in terms of expenditures and actions to reduce our emissions, as well as to backcast and say how we did in delivering on our promises. We've got the Independent Climate Solutions Council making their advice and commentary public. So this isn't a one and done. This is an ongoing process, constantly assessing how our measures are working, adjusting them if they're not working well enough, expanding them if they're working well and they're supporting BC families and businesses. So it's a process. But one thing that's clear is particularly after last summer and of course this past weekend, British Columbians really want government to take responsible action to address climate change, not only reducing emissions, but also helping us adapt to reduce the risk of wildfire, drought, and heat.
Now, I don't think anybody doubts that there are significant challenges in regards to climate change, but at the same time, people have to make a living. It's also about affordability for the average homeowner, and you represent a Vancouver riding, and you know the issue of affordability very well. One of the things in that report was to increase the price on carbon pollution to meet or exceed the federal benchmark. Now, at this particular point, could you tell our audience what that benchmark is? And is it neutral right now, fiscally neutral for the average person?
So currently, the federal carbon tax, as well as BC's, is scheduled to go up to $50 a ton on April 2022. The federal government announced a year ago as part of their plan, and as you know, they've been upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada with the right to set a carbon tax, that they're going to raise it $15 a year until they hit $170 a ton in 2030. So we've said, obviously, we'll be following that, and so we modeled that into our plan. But what we're doing, unlike a number of other provinces, is we've continued to design our own low and moderate income climate action tax credits, our support for industry, and we've committed, because the programs we have in place today weren't designed with that high a carbon tax in mind. We're working on them. We're going to sit down and have been sitting down with the Ministry of Finance to see how do we ensure that we maintain affordability for low and moderate income people, as well as how do we ensure that our businesses thrive and are healthy while they're reducing emissions. And we have a number of programs that are designed to achieve those. We had many industries in British Columbia apply for support to apply technology to reduce their emissions, and together, so far, we're reducing about 1 megaton through those measures.
I see.
We know that we can't leave anyone behind in this, Jazz. The carbon tax is meant to help people get ahead and reduce emissions, not make it impossible for them to do that.
Now, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, during the 5 o'clock news, says that it's not revenue neutral for anybody making over $59,000. Is that accurate?
I am not entirely sure that's accurate, but I certainly heard the comment. Our goal, however, is to ensure that we're designing a program that ensures that the middle class is not suffering, and is not suffering with respect to affordability. We're going to do that through the climate action tax credit, but we're also taking the supports we've given, for instance, for getting into a zero-emission vehicle, an electric vehicle, the supports we've offered for home energy efficiency. We think that we can do much better in making those available to a much broader spectrum of British Columbians, not just people who have enough money to start with to make the investment in home renovation or energy efficient furnaces or heat pumps or an electric vehicle. We know that we need to expand the access to these measures. And so we're looking at a range of programs that can do that can help families make those changes. And once they make those changes, their energy costs go way down. For people who drive electric vehicles, they know that what they spend on electricity and much, much lower cost for maintenance is a fraction of what it is for a gas-powered vehicle. And similarly, home energy, the heating by electricity really drops the energy costs for British Columbians for both heating and cooling, which is becoming increasingly important. So our message is, don't think you have to be rich to do these things. We want to make sure that everyone can do them.
I got a two-part question for you here. My final question to you. When it comes to competitiveness, now Alberta, of course, as part of that federal plan, will be charging a similar carbon tax, but you have Washington State that we also compete against. So my question number one is, how do we still remain competitive against other jurisdictions that don't have a carbon tax or have a very low carbon tax outside of Canada, number one? And number two, based on what I'm reading at this particular point, is there any hope of having another LNG project moving forward in this province, number one? But more importantly, large industrial projects that require use of energy, some extraction. But it seems to me, what I'm looking here, it's going to be very difficult, for an LNG industry to move forward, or a new LNG project to move forward, number one. And number two, anything that requires a resource that is energy intensive is going to have difficulty longer term operating in British Columbia. At the very least, difficult for us as a province to attract that business because they may go to other jurisdictions where they find it to be easier.
Thanks, Jazz. And the two parts of your question are really related. So in our work with the Business Council and our work with the mining industry and in our work with the oil and gas industry, we accept that we're not doing much good for the planet if British Columbia has industries that have actually lowered their emissions, which many have because we've had a carbon tax in BC for quite some time. And the market goes to jurisdictions that actually are much more emissions intensive. So we have worked to keep British Columbia industries competitive and healthy, particularly the emissions intensive ones, and we're committed to continue that work. I speak with the business community and the Business Council regularly, and as I said, we're going to ensure that we design a workable program to help business reduce emissions and stay in business. Those are the two important factors as the tax goes up. And we've also said that we want to ensure that proponents for new projects in BC, and this includes oil and gas, understand that we're serious about our sectoral targets, we're serious about meeting our legislative targets, and we're serious about being net zero by 2050. So show us your plans to fit within those targets. It's not just us who's saying that. We have tens of trillions of dollars from major investment houses that are saying to industry, if you want our investment, show us your plan to reduce emissions. Show us your plan to be net zero. So what I've said, and I said this today in the announcement, we've modeled LNG Canada Phase 1, which is the largest single private sector investment in Canadian history, in Clean BC, and again, it's still modeled within this roadmap. But we have also said that we're committed to finding ways, working with industry and Indigenous people, to reduce emissions in that sector by 33 to 38%. If someone can show us how they can fit, then we're open to it. But we're serious, and British Columbians are serious about fighting climate change, and our job is to provide leadership and certainty.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate your time today. Hope to have you on the show again to talk about the Climate Action Plan. Thank you so much.
Anytime, Jazz. Thanks.